The convoy was supposed to be routine, 8 vehicles rolling through the dusty outskirts of Kandahar province, delivering supplies to forward operating base Chapman. Specialist Miranda Hayes sat in the third truck, headset on, reviewing translation notes for the upcoming meeting with local tribal elders. She wasn't supposed to be carrying a weapon. Hell, she wasn't even supposed to leave the wire except for these carefully orchestrated diplomatic runs. Then, the lead vehicle exploded. The IED tore through the Humvee like it was made of paper, flipping it onto its side in a fountain of fire and twisted metal. Before anyone could react, automatic weapons fire erupted from both sides of the road. The distinctive crack of AK-47s mixed with the heavier thump of PKM machine guns. The convoy screeched to a halt, soldiers scrambling for cover as bullets punched through doors and shattered windows. Miranda's driver took 3 rounds through the windshield. He slumped forward, blood spreading across his uniform, foot jamming the brake pedal. The gunner in the turret was screaming into the radio, returning fire with the .50 caliber, brass casings raining down into the truck bed. In the chaos, nobody noticed Miranda reach under her seat. Nobody saw the way her hands moved with practiced efficiency, assembling the disassembled M4 carbine she'd stashed there against every regulation in the book. Nobody paid attention when she kicked open her door and rolled out into the dirt, weapon up, scanning for targets. Because everybody thought they knew who Miranda Hayes was. The quiet translator who kept her head down and did her paperwork. The linguistics specialist who'd never seen combat, never fired a shot in anger, never been anything more than support personnel. They had no idea who she used to be. Before we reveal what happened next, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from and hit subscribe, because what unfolded in the next 10 minutes would turn a routine supply run into a legend that would be whispered about in special operations circles for years to come. Miranda Hayes had learned to become invisible over the past 18 months. It was easier that way. Easier to blend into the background, to be the competent but unremarkable translator who showed up on time, did her job, and disappeared back into the administrative maze of Bagram Airfield. She wore her brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, her uniform always pressed but never standing out, her manner professional but never memorable. At 29, she'd mastered the art of being exactly what people expected, and nothing more. The soldiers she worked with saw a college-educated specialist who spoke Pashto and Dari fluently, who could navigate cultural nuances that saved missions and built relationships with local populations. They appreciated her competence while barely noticing her presence. That was exactly how she wanted it. The convoy departure had been scheduled for 0600 hours, but as usual in Afghanistan, nothing happened on time. Equipment checks ran long, a replacement driver had to be found for the second vehicle, and by the time the 8-truck column finally rolled out of the gate, the sun was already climbing toward its brutal zenith. Miranda had checked her translation materials 3 times, reviewed the cultural briefing notes, and made sure her interpreter credentials were easily accessible. Everything official, everything documented, everything that said non-combatant in every possible way. She didn't check the M4 she'd hidden under her seat. Didn't need to. She'd maintained it last night after everyone else had gone to sleep, cleaned and reassembled it in the dark by touch alone, muscle memory from a life she wasn't supposed to talk about. The convoy commander, Captain Derek Hoskins, had given the standard briefing. Route, timing, procedures for contact with the enemy. He'd glanced at Miranda when discussing civilian personnel protocols. Stay in your vehicle, let the security element handle any threats, don't be a hero. She'd nodded politely, the same way she always did. Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves, her usual driver, was a talker. Former college football player from Texas, built like a linebacker, with an easy confidence that came from never having been truly tested. He chatted amiably as they followed the lead vehicles out onto Highway 1, talking about his girlfriend back home, his plans after deployment, the fishing trip he was planning for leave. Miranda made appropriate responses, asked follow-up questions, maintained the fiction that she was just another soldier counting days until she could go home. She watched the terrain roll past, the same brown and tan landscape that had swallowed empires for millennia, hiding dangers in every shadow and fold of earth. The ambush site had been chosen with professional precision. A slight curve in the road where the convoy would naturally slow down, high ground on both sides providing overlapping fields of fire, a drainage culvert perfect for concealing explosives. Whoever planned this knew what they were doing. When the IED detonated under the lead Humvee, Miranda's world narrowed instantly into the crystalline focus that came from training most people never received. Time didn't slow down, that was a myth, but her perception sharpened, her mind processing information with the cold efficiency of someone who'd been in far worse situations than this. The truck shuddered as Reeves slammed the brakes. Miranda was already moving, one hand reaching for her weapon, the other releasing her seatbelt. She saw the bullet stitch across the windshield, saw Reeves jerk backward as rounds found him, saw his foot jam against the brake pedal in the kind of final muscular spasm that trauma sometimes causes. The gunner in the turret, Private First Class Tommy Chen, she remembered his name because she remembered everything, was doing exactly what he'd been trained to do, laying down suppressive fire even as rounds sparked off the armor plating around his position. Miranda assembled her rifle with movements that looked effortless because they had been practiced 10,000 times. Magazine seated with a solid click, charging handle-racked, selector switch off safe. 3 seconds from concealment to operational. She didn't announce herself, didn't wait for orders, just kicked her door open and rolled out into the chaos, coming up in a crouch behind the engine block, the only real cover available. The ambush was concentrated on the front and middle of the convoy. Smart tactics, kill the leadership element, trap the follow-on vehicles, then systematically destroy them from protected positions. The attackers were using the textbook approach that had worked against Soviet columns, that had worked against Afghan National Army convoys, that should have worked against this American patrol. Should have. Miranda's first target was a fighter in the high ground to the left, partially concealed behind a boulder cluster, firing controlled bursts from a PKM machine gun that was systematically chewing apart the convoy's defensive positions. Range approximately 200 meters, elevated position, wind negligible. She acquired the target through her optic, controlled her breathing automatically, and pressed the trigger with the kind of smooth precision that separated professionals from amateurs. The rifle cracked once, the suppressor she'd installed reducing, but not eliminating, the sound. The fighter's head snapped back. He toppled forward over his machine gun, disappearing from view. Nobody noticed. The chaos of the ambush was too loud, too violent, too all-consuming for anyone to register one more weapon firing among dozens. Miranda transitioned to her next target. A second fighter was moving through the rocks on the right side, trying to get an angle on the convoy's flank. He was good, using terrain well, staying low, moving during the confusion when return fire was sporadic and poorly aimed. She tracked him through her optic, waiting with the patience that had been drilled into her during training that officially never happened. When he paused to acquire his own target, she fired twice. Both rounds center mass. He dropped like someone had cut his strings. Still, nobody noticed her. The convoy was beginning to organize its defense. Soldiers were returning fire now, finding covered positions, establishing sectors. But they were reactive, responding to threats as they appeared, fighting from a position of disadvantage against an enemy that had chosen the time and place. Miranda was doing something different. She was hunting. Her third target was the most dangerous, a fighter with what looked like a Chinese-made QBZ-95 rifle, the kind of weapon that suggested military training rather than just tribal militia. He was coordinating movement on the left flank, using hand signals to direct other fighters into position for what would probably be a flanking assault. Miranda put him down with a single shot at 250 meters, threading the round through a gap between two rocks that most shooters wouldn't have even attempted. That's when someone finally noticed. "Who the hell is shooting?" Chen shouted from the turret, swinging his .50 caliber to track for additional friendly positions. "We got another vehicle in play?" Miranda didn't answer. She was already scanning for her next target, her mind automatically prioritizing threats based on weapon type, position, and capability. Years of training and operational experience had taught her to read a battlefield the way other people read books, understanding not just what was happening now, but what was about to happen next. The next phase of the ambush came exactly as she predicted. A team of 4 fighters emerged from a concealed position on the right, moving fast and low, trying to close the distance to the convoy while the defenders were focused on the machine gun positions in the high ground. Miranda engaged them methodically. 4 shots, 4 targets, 4 seconds. Each fighter dropped in turn, the last one actually making it to within 50 meters of the convoy before her bullet found him. Captain Hoskins had made it out of the destroyed lead vehicle and was trying to organize a coherent defense from behind the overturned Humvee. His tactical vest was scorched, his face blackened with soot, but he was functioning, calling out commands, directing fire. He saw Miranda then. Really saw her. Saw the weapon she shouldn't have had, saw the way she was moving, saw the precision with which she was eliminating threats that his trained soldiers were struggling to even identify. "Hayes!" he shouted. "What the—" Another burst of automatic weapons fire cut him off, rounds sparking off the overturned vehicle, forcing him back into cover. Miranda used the distraction to change position, moving to better ground near the rear of her disabled truck, where she had visibility on both flanks and the high ground. The enemy wasn't stupid. They'd noticed that their carefully planned ambush was falling apart, that fighters were dropping without apparent cause, that the Americans' defensive fire was suddenly much more effective than it should have been. They began to adapt. Smoke grenades detonated along the right flank, creating a screen that obscured visual targeting. Smart move, the kind of tactical adjustment that spoke of experienced leadership. Most militia groups would have just kept attacking headlong until they ran out of fighters or courage. But smoke worked both ways. While it concealed enemy movement, it also revealed that movement through the patterns of disturbance. Miranda watched the white clouds, reading the invisible signatures of people moving through them, predicting where they would emerge. When the first fighter burst out of the smoke screen, she was already tracking him. Single shot, center mass, no hesitation. The man fell, his momentum carrying him forward into a tumbling crash that kicked up dust. 2 more emerged simultaneously, trying to overwhelm her through speed and numbers. Miranda's rifle cracked twice in rapid succession, both targets down. The smoke cleared enough for her to see what she'd been worried about, a heavy machine gun position being set up in the high ground, the kind of weapon that could shred the convoy's light armor. The crew was working quickly, professionally, getting the weapon into battery. Miranda didn't have a clear shot. The gunner was behind cover, only his head and shoulders visible, and the angle was wrong. But the ammunition handler was exposed, carrying a heavy belt of linked rounds to feed the weapon. She shot him first. The man dropped, scattering ammunition across the rocky ground. Then she waited, counting seconds in her head, knowing what would happen next. The gunner leaned out to see what happened to his partner. Fatal mistake. Miranda's round caught him in the throat, the kind of devastating hit that ended fights instantly. "Hayes!" Captain Hoskins was moving toward her now, keeping low, using the vehicles for cover. How are you? "We need to move, sir," Miranda said, her voice calm despite the adrenaline singing through her system. "They're going to try to flank us from the north once they realize the frontal assault isn't working." "How do you know that?" "Because that's what I would do." Hoskins stared at her for a moment, trying to reconcile the quiet translator he thought he knew with the combat operator who was systematically dismantling an enemy ambush. Whatever questions he wanted to ask would have to wait. "What do you need?" he asked instead, making the kind of command decision that separated good officers from dead ones. "Cover on the left flank, and someone to suppress that tree line at 200 meters. That's where they'll stage for the flanking movement." Hoskins didn't question her assessment. He'd seen enough in the last 5 minutes to know that whatever Miranda Hayes really was, she understood combat at a level that exceeded most of his unit. He keyed his radio, calling out orders, redirecting his soldiers to the positions Miranda had identified. The convoy's defensive fire became more focused, more effective, denying the enemy the freedom of movement they needed to execute their tactics. Miranda continued her methodical elimination of threats. Each shot was deliberate, calculated, final. She wasn't spraying and praying like some of the younger soldiers, wasn't burning through ammunition in panic. Every trigger press was a decision, every bullet a solution to a specific problem. The enemy's will broke somewhere around the 15-minute mark. One moment they were fighting hard, trying to execute their ambush plan. despite casualties that should have been impossible. The next, they were melting away into the terrain, abandoning weapons and equipment in their haste to disengage. Miranda tracked the retreat through her optic, but didn't pursue. Let them run. Let them carry stories back about the convoy that couldn't be killed, about the invisible shooter who dropped fighters from impossible ranges. Fear was a weapon too, and sometimes the survivors did more damage to enemy morale than the dead. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the initial explosion had been. Ringing ears, the smell of cordite and blood, dust settling slowly in the aftermath of violence. Soldiers began calling out status reports, checking casualties, accounting for equipment. Miranda saved her weapon and set it down, then immediately moved to check on Reeves. She already knew he was gone. The headshots that had killed him weren't survivable. But she checked anyway, going through the motions, maintaining the fiction for a few seconds longer. "He's gone," she said quietly to Chen, who had climbed down from the turret and was staring at his dead driver with the kind of shock that came from the first time witnessing violent death up close. "Who are you?" Chen asked, his voice hollow. "Really?" "Just a translator, soldier. Now help me get him out of the seat. We need to get this convoy moving before they decide to come back with friends." Captain Hoskins organized the consolidation with practiced efficiency. The lead vehicle was a total loss, its crew of 4 killed instantly by the IED. 2 other soldiers wounded, neither critically. Equipment damaged, but mostly functional. All things considered, they'd gotten off light for a well-planned ambush. Too light, really. The ambushers should have inflicted far more casualties, should have destroyed at least half the convoy, should have won. Hoskins knew it. So did Miranda, and so did every soldier who'd been part of the fight and had watched an enemy position after enemy position go silent without understanding how or why. The captain found Miranda helping to load Reeves's body into one of the trucks. She was being gentle, respectful, treating the dead soldier with the kind of care that spoke of having done this before. Too many times before. "We need to talk," Hoskins said. "After we get back to base, sir. Priority is getting these trucks and these soldiers somewhere safe." "Hayes, with respect, Captain, we're still in the kill zone. Questions can wait. Survival can't." She was right, and he knew it. Hoskins bit back his interrogation and returned to organizing the convoy for movement. The damaged lead vehicle was stripped of equipment and abandoned. The remaining 7 trucks reorganized into a tighter formation, wounded, loaded, security elements reinforced. They rolled out 20 minutes after the ambush ended, moving fast, taking a different route back to base, every soldier watching the terrain with the kind of paranoid attention that came from having been hurt once. Miranda rode in the truck with Reeves's body, silent, maintaining her guard even though the danger had passed. Her weapon was back under the seat, disassembled, hidden. As if the last 20 minutes hadn't happened, as if she was just the translator again. But Chen kept looking at her, and Hoskins kept glancing in his rearview mirror. And the other soldiers who'd been close enough to see something, not everything, but something, kept trading looks that said their understanding of the world had shifted in ways they couldn't quite articulate. The convoy made it back to base without further incident. The gate guards waved them through, their casual professionalism evaporating when they saw the damaged vehicles and body bags. Alerts went out, casualty notification protocols initiated, commanders roused from their afternoon routines. Captain Hoskins pulled Miranda aside before she could disappear into the administrative maze where specialists like her normally existed. "My office, now. That's not a request." She followed without argument, knowing this conversation was inevitable. The question was how much she could reveal, how much she should reveal, and how much would remain classified until long after they'd all gone home. Hoskins's office was a converted storage container, stifling hot despite the struggling air conditioner, decorated with maps and duty rosters and the accumulated debris of a commander trying to fight a war with inadequate resources. He closed the door, activated a white noise generator, standard procedure for classified conversations, and turned to face her. "Start talking." Miranda remained at attention, her face neutral. "What would you like to know, sir?" "Everything. Who you are, what you are. How a translator I've worked with for 6 months turns out to be some kind of special operations ninja who can drop targets I can't even see." "I am a translator, Captain. That's my job. That's what I'm assigned to do." "Bullshit!" Hoskins slammed his hand on the desk, frustration breaking through his professional composure. I watched you. I saw what you did. That wasn't luck. That wasn't even just good training. That was world-class operational capability. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Who are you really? Miranda was quiet for a long moment, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a laminated card that definitely wasn't standard military issue. She laid it on Hoskins's desk. He picked it up, read it again, then looked at her with new understanding and new questions. Ranger Regiment, he said slowly. 3rd Battalion, 5 years operational. How is that not in your personnel file? Because it's not supposed to be, sir. My service history was redacted as part of my transition to strategic intelligence work. The translator position is my actual current assignment. Everything else is on hold. On hold why? That's classified above your clearance level, Captain. And mine, for that matter. I follow orders. Right now, my orders are to provide linguistic support and cultural advisory services. Nothing more. Hoskins set the card down, processing this information, trying to reconcile the quiet specialist with the combat veteran whose credentials he was reading. 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Combat Action Badge, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, the kind of record that most infantry soldiers would be proud to earn in a 20-year career. All from a 29-year-old woman who spent her days translating documents and sitting in on diplomatic meetings. Why? Hoskins finally asked. Why hide all this? Why pretend to be something you're not? Because that's the job now, sir. Sometimes the military needs door kickers. Sometimes it needs someone who can navigate complex cultural situations without looking like a threat. Can't do the second job effectively if everyone knows you used to do the first. The weapon, the modifications, that's not standard issue. No, sir. Where did you get it? I'd prefer not to answer that, sir. Hoskins rubbed his face, feeling the grit and dried blood and exhaustion. Outside, he could hear the organized chaos of a base dealing with casualties and damaged equipment. Inside, he was trying to figure out what to do with information that was clearly above his pay grade. The ambush, he said. You're shooting. How many did you take down? I didn't keep count, sir. I was focused on threat elimination. Ballpark estimate. 12 confirmed, maybe 15. 15 enemy fighters eliminated by a single shooter in approximately 20 minutes, while the entire rest of the convoy was struggling to establish basic defensive fire. The mathematics of it were staggering. Jesus Christ, Hoskins muttered. And you're telling me you're just a translator now? I am just a translator, Captain. What happened today was an exception. Emergency circumstances, self-defense. Won't happen again. Can't promise that, not in Afghanistan. Then I'll have to be more careful about which convoys I join, sir. Hoskins wanted to laugh but couldn't quite find the humor. Instead, he picked up her credentials again, studying them more carefully, noting details he'd missed on first reading. Your Ranger file says you left active combat roles after an incident in Helmand Province. Medical discharge, possible PTSD, reassignment to non-combat duties pending psychological evaluation. That's correct, sir. Is it true? Miranda met his eyes, and for just a moment, he saw something there that made him understand why she'd been pulled from frontline service. Not weakness, not trauma in the conventional sense, but something else, something harder to define. Parts of it are true, sir, the parts that need to be. Before Hoskins could push further, his radio squawked to life. The base commander wanted a briefing on the ambush, casualty reports, tactical assessment, plans for recovery and retaliation, the administrative machinery of war grinding into motion. We're not done with this conversation, Hoskins told Miranda. Understood, sir. But respectfully, I think we are. What happened today was an aberration. Tomorrow I'll go back to being the quiet translator who sits in meetings and files reports. Nobody needs to know anything different. My soldiers know different. Chen saw you. Half the convoy saw you. They saw someone shooting. In the chaos of combat, memory gets fuzzy. Details blur. By tomorrow they'll remember that everyone fought hard and we won. That's what matters. She was right, Hoskins realized. In the retelling, in the official reports, in the stories that would circulate through the base, the specific details would fade. The ambush would become another near miss, another close call, another example of American soldiers fighting their way out of a bad situation. Unless he pushed it. Unless he made it an issue. Unless he decided that protocol mattered more than operational security. "Get out of here," he finally said. "Get cleaned up. Write your report. Standard translator observations. Nothing more. I'll handle the tactical debrief." "Thank you, sir." Miranda retrieved her credentials, pocketed them, and turned to leave. She paused at the door. "Captain, the soldiers who died today, Reeves and the others, they deserve proper recognition. This wasn't their fault. They fought well. Make sure that's in your report." "I will." She left without another word, disappearing into the late afternoon heat, just another soldier moving through the organized chaos of a forward operating base. Within minutes, she'd vanished into the administrative areas where translators and intelligence personnel existed, becoming invisible again. Hoskins sat alone in his stifling office, holding her credentials, trying to decide what he believed and what he should do about it. Finally, he locked the card in his personal safe and went to brief the base commander on an ambush that could have been a disaster, but somehow became a victory. He never mentioned Miranda Hayes by name, just referred to effective defensive fire from convoy security elements and let the details stay vague. Some truths were too complicated to put in official reports. The investigation into the ambush lasted 3 days. Intelligence officers interviewed survivors, analyzed the enemy's tactics, tried to determine if this was an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern. They found enemy bodies, 17 total, all killed by rifle fire, many from ranges and angles that suggested exceptional marksmanship. "Could have been multiple shooters," the intelligence officer told Hoskins during the after-action review. "Some of these shots, I don't know, sir. They're the kind of thing you'd expect from a designated marksman, not from soldiers fighting out of a hasty ambush position." "My people are well trained," Hoskins said neutrally. "Yes, sir. Very well trained, apparently." The official report praised the convoy's defensive actions, noted the effectiveness of immediate action drills, recommended tactical changes for future movements. It made no mention of anomalous combat performance or unexpected capability displays. Miranda Hayes' name appeared exactly once in the list of personnel present during the engagement. Her contribution was listed as linguistic support and cultural advisory presence. Nothing more. She resumed her normal duties without comment, attending briefings, translating documents, advising on cultural considerations. The same quiet specialist who'd been doing the job for 6 months, unremarkable and professional. But something had changed, even if nobody talked about it. Soldiers who'd been on the convoy treated her differently, not obviously, not dramatically, but they made space for her in the mess hall, nodded when she passed, listened more carefully when she spoke during briefings. The subtle markers of respect that military personnel showed to those who'd proven themselves under fire. Chen approached her one evening as she was reviewing translation work in her small containerized housing unit. He knocked on her doorframe, hesitant. "Ma'am, got a minute?" "Come in, Private Chen. What can I do for you?" He entered awkwardly, holding his helmet, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. I wanted to say thank you for what you did out there. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know we'd have lost more people if you hadn't." He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. Miranda looked up from her paperwork, her expression neutral. "You did your job, Private. You stayed in the fight when it would have been easier to hide. You kept that .50 caliber running even when they were shooting back. That's what saved lives, not me." "That's not what I saw, ma'am." "Then maybe you should consider what you actually saw versus what you think you saw. Combat is chaotic. Memory is unreliable. The only thing that matters is that we survived and completed the mission." Chen nodded slowly, hearing the message behind her words. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." "Good. Now go get some rest. We've got another convoy next week, and I need my gunner sharp." He left, still uncertain but willing to accept the fiction she was offering. It was easier that way. Easier to believe that everyone had fought equally, that victory was collective, that there were no anomalies or exceptions. But he kept the empty brass casing he'd found near where she'd been fighting, kept it in his pocket like a talisman, a reminder that sometimes people were more than they appeared to be. 3 weeks after the ambush, Miranda received new orders. A brief encrypted message that appeared in her classified mailbox requiring her to report to Bagram for reassignment consideration. No details, no explanation, just coordinates and a time. She'd been expecting something like this. You didn't perform the way she had without attracting attention from people who paid attention to such things. The question was whether this was a reward or a problem. The flight to Bagram was on a routine resupply helicopter, cramped and noisy and giving her time to think. Time to consider what she would say, how she would explain, whether she wanted to go back to the life she'd left behind. The Ranger Regiment had been everything to her for 5 years. The training, the missions, the brotherhood of elite soldiers who understood sacrifice and excellence in ways most people never would. She'd been good at it. More than good. She'd been exceptional. Until the night in Helmand Province, when everything went wrong. Not wrong because of tactical errors or equipment failures. Wrong because she'd done everything right and people had still died. Because she'd made the correct decisions based on available information and the outcome had been catastrophic anyway. Because warfare didn't care about excellence or training or dedication when the chaos decided to break in unexpected directions. The after-action review had cleared her of wrongdoing. The psychological evaluation had found her fit for duty. The medals and commendations had arrived on schedule, but she'd requested reassignment anyway, asked to step back from the sharp end, to contribute in different ways, to be something other than the person who made life and death decisions in the dark. And for 18 months, that had worked. She'd been the translator, the advisor, the support element, using her language skills and cultural knowledge to contribute without carrying a rifle, without pulling triggers, without being responsible for the kind of violence that left permanent marks on the soul. Until one ambush had dragged her back into the role she'd tried to leave behind. The briefing room at Bagram was anonymous and climate-controlled, a stark contrast to the dusty heat outside. 3 people waited for her. A colonel she didn't recognize, a civilian in khakis who screamed intelligence community, and Major Sarah Cordova, who'd been her commanding officer during her final year with the Rangers. Miranda snapped to attention, reporting in with proper military protocol, while her mind raced through the implications of having Cordova present. "At ease, Specialist Hayes," the colonel said. "Have a seat. This isn't a disciplinary meeting." She sat, maintaining her composed expression, waiting. The civilian spoke first. "I'm David Brenner, Defense Intelligence Agency. We've been reviewing the incident from 3 weeks ago, the ambush outside Kandahar. Interesting reading." "Sir." Captain Hoskins's report was remarkably vague about certain details, specifically about how 17 enemy fighters ended up dead from precision rifle fire during what should have been an overwhelming attack. You wouldn't happen to have any insights on that, would you? "I provided what support I could, sir. The convoy security element performed exceptionally well." Brenner opened a folder, studying its contents. Forensic analysis of the engagement is puzzling. Bullet trajectories, shot placement, the apparent sequence of target elimination. It all suggests a single highly skilled operator working independently. Not a panicked convoy defense. Miranda said nothing. Major Cordova leaned forward. "Hayes, nobody's trying to jam you up here. But we need to understand what happened because it has implications for your current assignment and your future duties." "Ma'am, I followed my training, assessed threats, eliminated threats, survived." "Ranger training," Brenner said. "The training you're not supposed to be using anymore." "Emergency situations require appropriate responses, sir." The colonel spoke again, his tone measured. "Specialist Hayes, your psychological evaluation from Helmand Province recommended you step back from direct combat roles. The assessment suggested that continuing in high-stress operational positions might compromise your judgment or effectiveness. You agreed with that recommendation. You requested reassignment." "Yes, sir." "And yet, when presented with a high-stress combat situation, you performed at a level that suggests you never should have been pulled from operational status in the first place." This was the trap, Miranda realized. Either she defended her decision to step back, which meant acknowledging that her current performance was an aberration that shouldn't be repeated, or she admitted she'd been ready all along and had wasted 18 months in assignments below her capability. Sir, the situation in Helmand was different. The circumstances— I've read the report, the colonel interrupted. Multiple times. You made correct tactical decisions based on available intelligence. The outcome was unfortunate, but warfare is uncertain. Good soldiers die in ways that aren't anyone's fault. You understand that intellectually, don't you? Yes, sir. But not emotionally. Miranda met his eyes, and for a moment, she considered lying. Considered maintaining the fiction that she was fine, that she'd processed her trauma, that she was ready to go back. But something in the colonel's expression told her he'd see through it. No, sir, not completely. Honest answer, appreciate that. He leaned back in his chair. Here's our dilemma, specialist. We have a highly trained operator with proven capabilities who's currently wasted in a support role. But we also have someone who stepped back from operations for valid psychological reasons. We need to figure out which version of Miranda Hayes we're actually dealing with. Brenner spoke up again. The DIA has several programs that could use someone with your skill set. Hybrid roles that combine your linguistic capabilities with your operational background. Less direct action, more strategic intelligence work. You'd be carrying a weapon again, but the circumstances would be more controlled. And the regiment would take you back tomorrow, Major Cordova added. Your old unit is still asking about you. They respected your decision to step back, but they'd welcome your return. Or, the colonel said, you can stay exactly where you are. Continue your translation work, file reports, attend meetings, live a quiet life until your contract is up. Nobody's forcing you into anything, Hayes. But after what you did 3 weeks ago, we need to know what you want. What did she want? That was the question Miranda had been avoiding for 18 months. Easier to just exist, to go through the motions, to be useful without being exceptional. Safer emotionally, if not physically. But she'd felt something during that ambush, something she'd missed more than she wanted to admit. The clarity of purpose that came from solving problems that couldn't be handled with diplomacy or translation. The satisfaction of protecting people who needed protecting. The simple, primal truth that some situations required precise violence, delivered by people skilled enough to keep it surgical. Sir, I need to ask a question. Go ahead. If I go back to operational status, in whatever capacity, can I be assured I won't be put in situations where my decisions alone determine whether American soldiers live or die? Because that's what broke me in Helmand, not the combat, not the danger, the weight of being the last decision-maker before someone's family gets a folded flag. The 3 officers exchanged glances. Finally, the colonel nodded. We can structure assignments to ensure you're never the sole decision authority on life or death calls. You'd be part of teams with clear chains of command, with shared responsibility. Your skills would be utilized, but the weight would be distributed. Then I'll consider returning to operational status, sir. Under those conditions. Brenner smiled slightly. Good. Because we've already got 3 potential assignments that would benefit from your particular combination of capabilities. We'll brief you on them tomorrow. For tonight, get some rest. You're going to need it. The meeting concluded with paperwork and security briefings, the administrative machinery of the military grinding through its processes. Miranda signed forms, acknowledged protocols, agreed to additional psychological screening before final assignment. As she was leaving, Major Cordova caught up with her in the corridor outside. Hayes, wait up. Miranda stopped, turned. You did good work out there, Cordova said quietly, during that ambush. I read Hoskins's report, the classified version he filed separately from the official one. He couldn't avoid documenting what really happened, even if he kept it vague for general distribution. You saved lives. Just doing my job, ma'am. No. You were doing a job you'd walked away from because it cost you too much. That takes guts. To step back when you're exceptional at something requires more courage than most people realize. Didn't feel courageous, ma'am. Felt like giving up. It wasn't. And what you did 3 weeks ago proves it. You didn't freeze. You didn't hesitate. You didn't let Helmand paralyze you when it mattered. That's growth, Hayes. That's healing. Don't minimize it. Miranda nodded, not trusting herself to speak. One more thing, Cordova continued. Whatever assignment you take, whatever role you move into, remember that you're allowed to be complicated. You can be the translator who avoids combat and the ranger who excels at it. You can need distance from violence and still be capable of precision when necessary. You don't have to choose one identity and deny the other. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Cordova walked away, leaving Miranda alone with her thoughts in the sterile corridor. Around her, Bagram hummed with the constant activity of a major base. Helicopters landing, soldiers moving, the endless cycle of war continuing regardless of individual stories or struggles. For the first time in 18 months, Miranda Hayes allowed herself to consider that maybe she could return to being an operator without losing herself in the process. Maybe she could use her skills without being consumed by them. Maybe she could find a balance between the person she'd been and the person she'd tried to become. For the new assignment came through 2 weeks later. Hybrid role, exactly as Brenner had described. Part intelligence analyst, part tactical advisor, part direct action capability for situations that required surgical precision. She'd be carrying a weapon again, but she wouldn't be leading missions or making the final calls on engagements. Miranda accepted without hesitation. Before she left the forward operating base for her new post, Captain Hoskins requested a final meeting. They sat in his sweltering office, drinking terrible coffee, both knowing this conversation was overdue. "You're leaving," he said. "New assignment, sir. Orders came down yesterday." "Where?" "Can't say. Classified." Hoskins nodded, expecting that answer. "For what it's worth, you were a good translator. Professional, competent, helped us navigate situations that could have gone sideways." "Thank you, sir. But you were never really just a translator, were you?" "I tried to be, sir. For 18 months I really tried." "I know. I can see that now." Hoskins set down his coffee cup. "The soldiers from the convoy, Chen especially, they keep asking about you, wanting to know who you are, what you really do. I've been deflecting, keeping it vague, but they deserve some kind of answer. Tell them I was exactly what I appeared to be, a support specialist who did her job when circumstances required it. Nothing more complicated than that. They won't believe it. They don't have to believe it, sir. They just have to accept it." Hoskins studied her face, searching for something he couldn't quite name. "Do you think you'll end up back in the fight? Real combat, not just convoy defense?" "Probably, sir. Eventually. That seems to be where the Army keeps deciding I belong." "And you're okay with that?" Miranda considered the question carefully. Was she okay with it? Not completely. Maybe never completely. But she was functional, capable, able to contribute without breaking. "I'm okay with being useful, sir. With protecting people who need protecting. With using the skills I've spent years developing. If that means carrying a rifle again, then yes. I'm okay with it. Good luck, specialist. And for what it's worth, thank you. For what you did. For my soldiers. For all of us. Just doing my job, Captain." She left his office and walked across the base one final time, past the soldiers who'd been on the convoy and now watched her with new respect, past the translators who'd worked alongside her and never suspected, past the entire machinery of war that ground on regardless. Chen caught her at the gate as she was boarding the transport that would take her to Bagram. "Ma'am," he called out. "Wait!" She stopped, turned. He ran up, slightly out of breath, holding something in his hand, the brass casing he'd kept from the ambush. "I wanted you to have this," he said. "I know you'll probably say you don't need it or whatever, but I picked it up after the fight, one of your shots, and I wanted you to know that some of us understood. Maybe not all of it, maybe not the whole story. But we understood that you kept us alive when we should have died." Miranda took the brass casing, its metal warm from his grip. She studied it for a moment. 5.56 millimeters, once fired, properly extracted and ejected. The physical evidence of a moment when she'd chosen to be more than she was pretending to be. "Thank you, Private Chen. Stay sharp, stay alive. Keep that .50 caliber running. Yes, ma'am. And hey, wherever you're going, whatever you're doing next, fuck 'em up. She smiled, brief and genuine. That's the plan. The transport pulled away, carrying her toward a new assignment and a new identity that would somehow incorporate both versions of herself. Behind her, the forward operating base grew smaller, eventually disappearing into the dust and heat haze of the Afghan landscape. Miranda Hayes, former ranger, current hybrid operator, turned the brass casing over in her fingers and allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be both the person who avoided violence and the person who excelled at it when necessary. The two identities didn't have to be contradictions. They could be tools in a toolkit, each appropriate for different situations, each valuable in context. And in a war where nothing was simple and every truth came with complications, maybe that was the best anyone could hope for. She pocketed the brass casing and pulled out her orders folder, reviewing the details of her new assignment one more time. Kabul-based intelligence fusion cell, working with Joint Task Force operations. She'd be analyzing enemy patterns, advising on tactical approaches, and occasionally, when the situation absolutely demanded it, providing precision support for high-value targets. It wasn't the quiet translator life she'd tried to build, but it also wasn't the full-time operational tempo that had broken something inside her in Helmand. It was a middle ground, a compromise between capability and sustainability. The helicopter's crew chief tapped her shoulder and pointed down. Through the open door, she could see the sprawling complex of Bagram Airfield approaching, its runways and facilities stretching across the valley like a small city, devoted entirely to the machinery of war. Somewhere down there, new teammates were waiting. People who would know her full background, who would understand both what she could do and what she'd survived. People who wouldn't expect her to be just one thing or the other, but would accept the complicated reality of who she actually was. The landing was smooth, professional. Miranda gathered her gear and stepped out into the familiar heat, ready to begin again. Not as the person she'd been, not as the person she'd tried to become, but as someone who'd finally learned that you didn't have to choose between your past and your present, you just had to find a way to carry both forward. Behind her, the rotors spun down. Ahead, a new chapter was beginning. And for the first time in 18 months, Miranda Hayes felt ready for whatever came next. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories every day.